Hi, this is Ivan and welcome to the channel. Today I would like to discuss and then demonstrate a program called Microsoft Flight Simulator Pop-Out Panel Manager. All of us that use additional monitors along with software such as Air Manager or perhaps hardware such as RealSimGear are familiar with the frustration of how time-consuming it can be to set up our pop-out panels on a per-session basis. Pop-Out Panel Manager automates that process and can significantly decrease setup time. This video will have 3 sections, with the first covering basic use of the software and how to set up and place the pop-out panels. That will be followed by running through the setup of 2 different aircraft to demonstrate actual use. I will include the link for the software in the description below. Okay, I want to start from the Ready to Fly screen. Here I have the Asobo Cessna 172 G1000. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and hit Ready to Fly and load into the cockpit here. And here we are with a basic view, and I have all the power and the avionics off. And so this may be the view that you start with. There's a couple of things that we have to consider. Basically, what Pop-Out Panel Manager does is it automates the pop-out process, but it almost does it as if you were doing it yourself. So it's basically automating your movements. And so one thing that has to happen is Pop-Out Panel Manager has to be able to see what you're going to pop out. So in other words, can't pop anything out if it can't see it. Like in this case, you can't see the 2 screens, the PFD or the MFD. And so you have to set up a view to where you can see all of the panels that you're going to pop out. So if you had more panels, you may have to zoom out or go in such a way, but in this particular case, it's just the 2 panels, so we're going to do that. So now here, again, we're at the very beginning of the setup. You have a couple of options. One, this program looks for whatever view is saved when using Control-Alt-0. Now you can change that, and I'll go over how to do that, but initially it's set to Control-Alt-0, which of course you can recall by hitting Alt-0. So these are saved custom views within Microsoft Flight Simulator. So now what I'm going to do is call up the interface of the program, and then we can discuss and kind of go through all the different settings. Okay, so here is the Pop-Out Panel Manager program itself. Please ignore where it says Baron G58. That's another profile, and we're going to set this profile up from scratch. Having said that, you can already see that Pop-Out Panel Manager has identified that this is the Asobo 172 with the G1000. So let's look at the different settings. The first thing we're going to do is make a profile. So I'm going to hit the plus, and let's just do C172 G1000 and hit OK. So now this has turned green, and what that means is you can allow this program to automatically detect the plane that's loaded and bind it to the profile such that when you start the airplane, or when you go into the airplane rather, it will automatically run this application. So we have some settings to look at and to configure. The first one says power on required to pop out panels on cold start. It says G1000, G3000. What this means is within Microsoft Flight Simulator, some of the aircraft, and definitely this one for sure, require the power to be on before you can pop out the panel. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's go back to the main view here, and notice this is independent of the program. The normal way to pop out a panel is to, of course, put your mouse over it and the right side Alt key, left click. And you can see it's not turning into the normal plus sign. Well, for some reason, this aircraft is set up in such a way that the power has to be turned on or it won't be able to pop out. So let me turn on the power here. And now you see where it is starting to power up. Now watch what happens now. See how that turns into a plus? So the power has to be turned on before you can even pop this out. And that's independent of using the pop-out panel manager. If I come over here to the MFD, the power is off, and you notice that it cannot pop out. So what I have to do is turn the avionics on, and now I can pop it out. And same over here. Now I can pop it out. So I'm going to turn that back off. So that's just functionality of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So going back to the pop-out panel manager, what will happen is when we click this box, it will automatically power up the two units, the two displays, and allow the procedure to continue. The second box here is include in-game menu bar panels such as VFR map, checklist. And I don't use those. Please feel free, of course, to play with that as you like. But I suspect it has to do with using the VFR map if you want to place it in a different screen, which some people do. Now let's continue on and go to 3, where it says identify pop-out panel locations in the game by clicking on them. And so what we're going to do is we'll go back to our main view, and I'll show you how this works. But essentially, you're going to left click on a panel to identify it. A number will appear. If you make a mistake and click somewhere that you don't want to click, you hold the shift key down and left click, and it will erase the last thing you chose. And when you're done, you can hit control and left click, and that tells the application that you have selected all your panels. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that by hitting Start Panel Selection. We'll get to Override Auto Panning Camera here in just a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Start Panel Selection. The app will minimize. We'll go back to the main screen. Now here you have a couple of options before I click on anything. You can go ahead and set up your own view and then hit Control-Alt-0 and save it. So if I were to change the view and then hit Alt-0, it brings us back. That's the easiest way to do this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click, and you see that it says 1, and now it says 2. If I had misclicked, I would hold the shift key down, hit left click on the mouse, and the last screen that you clicked on or the last point that you clicked on will disappear. Go ahead and put it back. And once you're done, you can hit Control left click. Now you have chosen, I'm going to go back to the pop-up manager. And you can see over here we have panel locations. And it says panel 1, panel 2, and it gives you the X and Y coordinates. Now, override auto panning camera. If you had not assigned a view to Control-Alt-0, you could click on this and it would overwrite your whatever view was previously in Control-Alt-0 for your saved views and add the view that the screen is currently on. So if I go to here and I were to click on Override Auto Panning Camera, it would then save this view as Control-Alt-0. And so now what I'm going to do, but we're not going to do that because I already saved it myself, which I demonstrated earlier. So now I'm ready to start the pop-out process by hitting Start Pop-Out. So I'm going to do that. Let's go back to this view and let's watch what happens. Did you note that the panels powered up by themselves? And what we have, and then it powered down because I in fact have my panels turned off. And I can change that by turning my panels back on. But I just wanted to demonstrate why you have to check that box about applying power. So now I have 2 custom panels, and I can move these around and place them, and we'll demonstrate that next. So what I'm going to do here is show 3 screens. The 2 gray areas on the bottom are my additional displays. I tend to use the one on the bottom left as my PFD and the one that's on the bottom right as my MFD. And I'm going to go ahead and power up my screens. I have panel 1, which, as you recall, was the PFD. Panel 2, as you may recall, was the MFD. Now, I'm not going to do exact placement right here. I'll demonstrate that in just a bit. But initially, I just want to show you that the pop-out panel manager is going to memorize your placement. It's also going to memorize your size. So if I change this size out and put this right here, and for whatever reason, make that smaller. And of course, this will be dictated by your personal needs, perhaps how your bezels are set up on Air Manager or RealSimGear. And so I'm just going to move these, and let's just say that that's perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up the pop-out panel manager again. And let's see if I can zoom in on that. And you can see here that it says panel 1, panel 2, gives me the locations and the sizes, and you can click if you want it always on top or hide the panel bar, etc. And you can also click on, if you need to move it around, you can click on, say, the width and change that with down here, and I'll demonstrate that again in just a bit. But right now I'm just doing basic placement. And let's say you were happy with this. You would hit lock, and that would lock the panels. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, I'm going to hit restart, and let's come back over to here. I'm going to go back to all, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this process from beginning. We have already saved everything. Everything's good to go. I'm going to hit the start pop out, and let's see what happens. So far, so good. I'm not doing any of this. The program is doing all of it. And you can see it placed the panels exactly where we left them. And I'll minimize this so you can kind of see a little bit better. And that's exactly where we left them. And then that is pretty much it. That is the basics of how to use this program. What I'd like to do now is run through some of the basic settings. And now we're back to the main screen. What I'd like to do is I would like to go through some of the preferences just to kind of show you what this program can do. So application settings, pretty self-explanatory here, always on top. You can have this set up to where it will automatically start just when you load Microsoft Flight Simulator. It modifies the XML config file, or the exe rather, XML file. You can have it minimized to the tray. You can have it start minimized, and then you can have it automatically close out when you close Microsoft Flight Simulator. And here you can determine if you want to allow these profiles to be bound to a certain aircraft. Then you have your pop-out settings. Here's where you can change if you want it the initial view set to your Control-Alt-0 view, which I have left it there. You can, of course, change that. You can have it to where it will minimize after everything is popped out. The screen will minimize. And you can have it to where after you're done popping everything out, you can return it back to a custom view. And you can choose that. And there's some other functionality here. This also allows for touch setting, and this is particularly useful on the G3000, or the 580 panels, and I'll demonstrate that later, where you can actually use the touch on the display itself and get stuff. And then it's got track out IR and windowed mode settings, which I have not used any of that. So close that out. And that is the basic setup and use of the Microsoft Flight Simulator Pop-Out Panel Manager. Stick around and I'm going to show the setup, the complete setup for the 172, and then I'll also do a setup for the Vision Jet. Otherwise, you have enough to get started with what I've gone over now, but it may be helpful to watch me completely set up an aircraft. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to run through really quickly setting up the Cessna 172 with the G1000, and we're going to be using the Pop-Out Panel Manager along with Air Manager. So let's go ahead and jump into the plane. And here we are. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my saved custom view by getting right to there, and I'm going to hit Control-Alt-0. Again, Control-Alt-0. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the Pop-Out Manager, and I am going to set up a profile. We'll call this Cessna 172. Hit OK. I'm going to power on required because that is a requirement for this particular aircraft. And now I am going to start my panel selection. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to this view. I'm going to hit Start Panel Selection. And that will minimize. Go back to Main View here. And let's add my panels. So 1, 2. And then I'm going to hit Control, left click. And that will bring back the Pop-Out Panel Manager. And you can see here that it says I'm ready to start the pop-out. I've got my positions, initial positions. I'm not going to hit the Override Auto Panning Camera because I've already saved my view. What I will do, just to make it easier to look at, is turn the panels on. So let me hit Start Pop-Out. And it is going to go into that pop-out process. And this is doing this all automatically. And we've had successful pop-out. And now I'm going to go back to this view. And you can see that this screen has come up showing the current locations, where they are, and the next step is going to be to move the screens around. So I'm going to minimize this. And let's go ahead and take a look. Here you can see I have my Air Manager bezels already up and going. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move these pop-out screens over. So one thing right off the bat, you can see these little black bars on the side. When Microsoft does its pop-outs, it preserves the ratio of this, so you will end up with bars either on the side or the top sometime. You can get rid of that to some extent, just kind of, there you go, that's good enough. And now I'm going to slide this over. You can see I'm going to tuck this into the corner and grab that other corner. Now once you get it placed, you just let go and that screen has been placed. And now it's hard to see the black bars here. So I'm going to hit sorry about that. Let's go ahead and now I can see the black bars a little bit better. There we go. And now I'm going to bring this over to here. Tuck it in the corner, drop it, grab this corner, and drop it there. I will note, just as a property of Air Manager, if you drop it and you're not happy with that, but you can't grab the corner, you will have to close the panel, resize it, and reopen the panel. But now I'm pretty much good to go with my placement. I need to lock that in. So I'm going to call back the pop-out panel manager, and we'll go back to that. And you can see that these numbers have changed. I don't need to press any of these. I'm going to hit lock panel. When I move away, that should turn red. And then what I'm going to do now is hit restart. And we'll go back to all. And let's see what happens. We'll start over from the beginning. So I will hit start pop out. So far, so good. Again, I'm not doing any of this. And good to go. So that is from start to finish. And you can see it returns to that saved view. And that is how you set it up in the 172 using Air Manager and the pop-out panel manager. Okay, so now we're going to work on the Cirrus Vision Jet. Now this one is a little bit more difficult to set up initially, which actually makes the pop-out panel manager even more valuable. There's a couple of nuances that pertain to Air Manager, and there are more screens to pop out with the Cirrus Jet. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and jump on in. And so here we are in our basic view. And I'm going to do like I did before. I'm going to set up my basic view. Now you can already see, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. You can already see we have more panels to pop out. And I'm going to pop out the PFD, the MFD, and these two guys here. This one is just duplicated of this one normally. So I'm only going to do the 4. So let's go ahead and bring up the pop-up panel manager. And let's make our new, we'll just call this Vision. And hit OK. This one does not require to have the power on to pop out the panel, so we don't need to worry about that. But we will go ahead and start our panel selection. So let's go ahead and start that. So I'll hit start, and then this will minimize. And we'll come over here and select 1, 2, 3, 4. Now again, if I accidentally clicked on that, I can hold the shift key down, left click, and that goes away. I only want these 4. It's going to be control, left click, and now I can go back to here, and we can see that I've got 4 panels with locations, and now I can start the pop-out process. So let me go ahead and bring this up, and we'll hit start pop-out. You can see that it's doing all this automatically. I'm not touching this at all. And it looks like it's going to be successful, and it was. So now what I'm going to do is we can see that this has come back. We have our current locations, and now I'm going to move them to their final places on the external displays or additional displays. And again, this one's going to be a little more difficult. Let me go to this view here, and I'm going to shrink this down, minimize this. And here is my current setup using Air Manager for the Cirrus Jet. And I want to thank the folks at Sim Instrumentation for these instruments for Air Manager. They are just gorgeous. So thanks guys for all your hard work. We really appreciate it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these screens around just like we did with the Cessna, but this one's a little bit harder. And let me get rid of my bars. And here is why. For some reason, and I don't know why, if I were to bring this over and let go of it, I would not be able to move it again. It would just freeze. So I kind of have to get this one, eyeball it, and then move it back off the screen and resize it. The other issue is the ratio of this pop-out screen is not the same as this bezel. So it's not going to fit perfectly from corner to corner, but it'll get pretty close. So let me make this a little bit bigger. And let's see how we did with that. That actually is pretty close. Let me bring it back. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. See what we got. And that is actually really close. I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit more. And that is pretty good right there. Now what I could also do is kind of use this first one as a guide for the second one. So I could actually bring this down like that. Bring that to match. Stretch that out. And that'll get me pretty close. Just kind of line it up. This is just saving me a little bit of time when I... So now I'm going to drag this over and kind of line it up. And then once I let go, I can't move it with the mouse, but there's another way I can move it, and I'll show you that in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and bring the second one over. These bezels I have set up to be the same. So if the first one fit and it's the same size, the second one should fit. And that looks pretty good, so I'm going to let go. I'm good there. And if I wanted to, what I could do is I could bring up, let's say I want to move this one around over here on this MFD. I can bring back the pop-out panel manager. I can go to where it says panel 4, and then I can say if it was not quite wide enough or too wide, I could click on the parameter and come down here and I can change it. Actually, that's the wrong one. It's panel 2, sorry. So you can see how that's moving, and I could put it back. So you can tweak it down to the pixel. So that's one way to do that. So I'm going to shrink that down. And now I'm going to place panel 3 and 4. Now these are really big going on to smaller. So I'm going to shrink this down and bring this over. And this panel will actually let you move it once you've dropped it, as long as you can click on one of the edge. So I'll do that. And I'll bring it over. And you can see that little black space there. I don't like that. So I'm going to bring back the pop-out panel manager. I'm going to go to screen, pop-out screen 3 or panel 3. I'm going to hit width. And I'm going to kind of adjust that. And again, these aren't the same dimensions. They're not the same ratios. So there's going to be a little space here. There's nothing I can do about that. And now I'm going to bring over this fourth panel. Let me shrink it down. And that should get pretty close. Tuck it in the corner there. And actually that one was pretty good. So I like my placement. I'm going to go back over here. Now let me bring this to here. Panels 4 and 5 in the Garmin world actually have touch capability in real life. And in Microsoft Flight Simulator, I don't believe they do without this hack or this cool function of pop-out panel manager. So I'm going to go to panel 3 and 4. And I'm going to click Touch Enabled. And that will allow me to actually touch on the panels themselves to get functionality like dialing in a frequency. So now I'm going to hit lock panel. That's locked. And let's go back to all. I'm going to restart and start pop out. Let's see what happens. So far, so good. Again, it's doing this all automatically. Looks like it's going pretty well. And there we go. Big, big time saver. And I could have it set, if you recall, where I could come to preferences and have this minimize after it pops everything out. So just to know that is an option. But there we go. It's all set up. And once you're done, you're done. And that is a big, huge time saver. So for example, what I could do is I could actually, let's call this back up. Let's take a look over here. I'll go to restart. You see I have it bound. Let's see what happens if I do this. I'm going to minimize and go to all. Hit escape, restart, continue. And hopefully, if this works right, go to ready to fly. Let's see what happens. And you can see here that this doesn't require to have the power on to go through all the steps. And that just did all of that automatically and then returned back to my standard view. So that is how you set up the Cirrus Vision Jet using Pop-Out Panel Manager and Air Manager. So hopefully you found this helpful and informative. I want to give a big shout out to the developer of Microsoft Flight Simulator Pop-Out Panel Manager, and of course to the guys at Sim Instrumentation. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments box below. I'll do my very best to answer. Otherwise, you guys have a great day.